Dear security guards of Reddit, what was the most fucked up thing you've ever saw on your shift? Saw a guy shitting into a bucket all the way at the bottom of our parking garage. When I told him he had to leave, he tripped on his bucket and his ass had what I assume was blood all over it. It was horrible. He then picked up the bucket and put it in his van unsecured, so I'm almost positive it later spilled in his van. I asked if he was okay and he said yes and just left. In public housing there are a fair number of dead bodies that go unnoticed until they start to smell. In motels there are a lot of domestic violence calls. One of the couples, usually the aggressor, will attack security. Lots of prostitutes and drug sales. This is universal in all types of motels. Motel 6 to the 3-star place. We aren't cops, so there is little we can do other than call the cops. Another thing, we encounter way more out of place poop than we should. Worked at a building that had an attached thrift store and saw a fire truck roll up to the entrance on the camera. Ran over to figure out what was going on. I had no calls or alarms going off. Turns out a morbidly obese customer had fallen off the toilet and gotten stuck between the toilet and the wall, and managed to call 911. The part I'd actually consider fucked up was one of the firefighters pulled me aside after and said we took a blanket off the rack to cover them up. But, you're not going to want it back. I didn't see it, but in our daily pass along were warnings to be on the lookout for a woman shitting in the stairwells. We had a guy who was shitting in our parking stairwell as well. Had to call the police on him to finally stop. People walking by that never appears on footage. I'm not a security guard, but I've witnessed security guards handling it several times. I used to work at a casino and there would be addicts who would not step away from a slot machine for anything. That includes using the bathroom. One time a lady had shit herself, sat in it, and continued to play. Security had to saran wrap her so nothing would leak out and sent her home. I had a temporary job working overnight security for a hotel. The 3 months I had been doing it were mostly uneventful, but the lack of sunlight was getting to me. I'd start at 11 p.m., do some rounds, wait for the bar to empty out, find an empty smoking room and get high, watch late night TV, raid the kitchen for pastries, then watch the sun come up on the roof and go home at 7 a.m. It was literally my last shift before I started a new job. Everything was going smoothly until 6:30 a.m. The front desk calls me on my radio and says there is a noise complaint from one of the occupied rooms. The clock radio alarm had been going off for 20 minutes. To add to it, the front desk tells me the room requested a wake-up call 30 minutes before and hadn't answered multiple attempts to call. I head up to the room and a maintenance guy joins me just in case. I get to the door and sure enough the clock alarm is blaring full volume. I can hear the phone in the room ringing too. The big heavy older type phone with an actual fucking bell in it. I knock on the door and shout over the noise. No answer. I pound on the door. No answer. I dip my keycard and start to open the door, but the upper latch is still connected. I pause. I guess I had unconsciously assumed that the room was empty given the volume of noise in the room. But the security latch can only be closed by someone in the room. My mind raced, but there was only one logical conclusion to draw from the evidence. I used a card to pop the security latch and opened the door. Laying face down on the bed, half covered by a bedsheet, is a middle-aged man with a hairy back. I look at the maintenance guy, who gives me a look that says, "The fuck you want me to do?" I enter the room and say, "Excuse me sir," in the most authoritative voice I can muster, loud enough to be heard over the alarm in the phone. No response. I get next to the bed and louder this time, "Excuse me sir." No response. I reach my hand out, grab the dude's hairy shoulder and shake it. "Excuse me sir." Guy lifts his head up, looks at me confused, and just goes, "Oh sorry." Watched a pimp strip his girl down naked at gunpoint, immediately called the police, and then proceeded to walk her down to the river at gunpoint. Luckily police arrived in time and she still wouldn't press any charges. Just awful and sad situation. I worked as a concierge at a high-rise condo, but part of my duty was watching the cameras and making sure the condo was secure. Anyways, one day I get back from my break and there was a ton of cops in the courtyard because someone had been shot and killed there. They asked me to help them review the cameras, so I did. It was an old man who lived in the building and committed suicide. I saw him put the gun to his head, pull the trigger, and collapse. I won't forget that image ever. It was really heartbreaking. His wife had died unexpectedly and he decided there was no point on continuing to live. Former security guard. Once opened an electrical room to a bunch of swastikas and racist stuff graffitied on the wall in human shit. Only know it was human shit from the smell and the fact that there was a guy in there trying to finish his art. That or the dude who died from an overdose in the family restroom. Didn't even lock the door. Some lady and her toddler went to walk in and found the dude, needle in his arm, mouth full of vomit. Medics said he must have puked while he was out of it and basically drowned. Worked security at a concert venue. We had a dude just out of his mind on some kind of wild shit and had to pull him out and put him on the ground and zip cuff him. He put his face to the ground and got a mouthful of rocks and started chewing. Could hear all his teeth breaking and falling out of his mouth with so much blood. And he was just smiling like the Joker. Fucking moderate drug use. Not me, but recounted to me by a mall security guard friend. He saw a young man who had been banned from the mall for shoplifting going into a bathroom, looking very wary and suspicious as usual. He went over and followed him in there. expecting to find him taking tags off merchandise, but instead found him and 350-something men in varying states on undress all getting ready to have sex with each other in the handicap stall. One of them actually said it's not what it looks like, and that's when my friend lost it and just started yelling "get out" over and over again until they were all dressed and gone. My response from 7 years ago, https://www. reddit.com/r/askreddit/1vfpbt/z/certain2s greater than not my current security gig, but when I did security in Obetz, Ohio, I was training a new guard, an immigrant from Somalia. I can't remember his name, but he was very unfamiliar with everything about America. One night around 3 a.m. we saw a skunk walking around outside of our guard shack. My trainee had never seen one before and asked what it was. I explained that it was a skunk and exactly what would happen if he got too close to it. Well, he didn't believe me and decided it looked like a cat. He got sprayed and I made him stand outside the shack. It was also his first winter in Ohio. A heroin odd. I work industrial, and it's a whole mess of a story. But basically, this client employee owed it in a bathroom during a power outage, while I was training a new guard on his first day. The most fucked up part is that if the power hadn't gone out, he never would have come up missing during our required head count, and he would have died before we could get paramedics to him. They got him back with 2 shots of Narcan. Finally, something I can answer. It's not really fucked up, but a few months ago I was roving the outside of the buildings at night. We work at the foot of the Rocky Mountains, so I've seen my fair share of deer, fox, coyotes, etc. I was finishing up my 3 a.m. check when I walked around the corner and met eyes with a fully grown mountain lion. He was about 10 feet away. Now, I know that you're supposed to remain calm, don't bend down, etc. All that training went out the window. I booked it around the corner and tried to get inside as quickly as possible. The mountain lion gave chase for a brief minute, then broke off and ran into the brush once it saw my reflective vest. I had my gun out and was never so scared in my life. It made for some pretty funny camera footage though. Edit, for those asking for the footage, I do not have video of the events. However, I did take 2 screen grabs of the mountain lion from the tapes. https://imgur.com/a/uedenka. I was working as a bouncer as a favor for a friend with a company on New Year's Eve. It was in an old movie theater converted to a nightclub, so it had those balconies that peeked out over the bottom section, which was now the dance floor. I saw a whole bunch of PO pointing up at the balcony directly above me. I look up and got a bottom view of this dude fucking a girl doggy style bent over the balcony railing. The dude was huge, like 6 feet 5 inches, 300 plus pounds, and the girl's was probably the same weight but 5 feet 5 inches. The view from the bottom was horrific to say the least. Condo security. A resident tried to bribe me into a gay love triangle, which eventually ended with him crashing his car, kidnapping his lover, and then jail time. But the worst is the cops that show up for DV calls and don't give a shit. They'll be back together next week, they say, as if it absolves them of doing their job. I'm not the security guard in this situation, but I was in the building when it happened. My partner was working at a hostel that houses medical patients from fly-in-only communities while they and their families receive various medical treatments. A large portion of the guests are pregnant. Well, this one teenage girl had been missing most of the afternoon and her family were becoming concerned. I had brought my partner lunch to work and was sitting in the lobby with him when a security guard who was searching the grounds for her found her. She had hanged herself in a supply closet after drowning her newborn. As in, she just gave birth in the closet, in a mop pail. I've been in healthcare security for just over a decade. I'm in the technical side of it now, but spent about 5 years as a uniformed officer. Man, I have so many stories. We work directly with mental health patients, ranging from drunks in the ER to full-blown psych unit patients, workplace violence situations, domestic assault between patients and their families, assault, theft and robbery, and so many other things. The biggest one that stands out to me as the most fucked up. That's tough. So, one night we got a report of the sound of broken glass in the parking deck. Me and a coworker go out on foot to investigate as our mobile unit was off campus. Sure enough, we hear it. Turns out it's someone trying to steal a car. If I recall correctly, he broke into several before finding one he was able to hotwire. We catch him in the act. Cue the Scooby-Doo scene of running around chasing him, trying to corner him until PD arrives. We get him on the 3rd level up. Mobile unit, who had finally come back, is coming down the deck. Coworker is going up, and I come out of the stairwell at the center, directly across from him. I start calling for him to give up. He's caught. PD will be there any moment. It's over. What does dude do? He climbs over the edge, and tries to drop down and catch himself on the next level down. This middle-aged, overweight dude. Nope. He falls straight down their stories, lands on his feet. The sound was nauseating. We rushed down, got an ambulance en route. Dude lived but would likely never walk again. Got a look at his x-rays in the ER while getting information together for my report and talking with PD, who eventually showed up after the bus took him around to our ER. I choose that story because he wasn't a patient to begin with. There are many things I've seen in my years is that hospital. I worked as a mall security for a bit years ago. One of the 9 there guys heard a lady scream but didn't see anything. So he took note of the time and area. So, we had this mentally handicapped kid that got out of his group home and ran around the mall for a couple hours that same day before the cops finally got notified and caught him screaming about Jesus while sprinting around the food court. Back to the scream. We looked at the cameras later to see if we could find out what had happened. This kid walked right up to this younger woman and cupped his hand between her legs for a second and then walked off like nothing happened. She had pretty clearly screamed there, stood there for a second afterwards, then started laughing as she walked off. I mean, what else do you do when some obviously mentally handicapped kid grabs a handful of genitals and then walks off? I guess? I posted this in another thread about a year ago, but I'll share it here for you op. Many years ago I worked armed security. I was patrolling at an abandoned refinery late one night when a silent alarm was tripped. I went to investigate it when a kid, no more than 19, drew down on me. I tried talking him down, but was unsuccessful. I tried so very hard. He was convinced that the copper he was trying to steal was worth more than his life. He shot at me and I returned fire. He missed me and I struck him in the head. Not one of my favorite memories. Ex-security guard here. Someone had covered an entire restroom with feces. This was 2 years ago. I have since left security. My very first shift/post. My first night on the job I had to do fire watch at a scummy 2-story hotel with about 40 rooms in it. The entire hotel was condemned because the back stair set that separated each floor was about to collapse. Code enforcement and fire department condemned it. Anyway, my job was to get everyone out of the hotel to move to another hotel the owner had. The entire motel was full of mostly crackheads and near homeless people trying to survive in it, making weekly payments. The parking lot was full of junky cars not running. It was run down and derelict. It was something out of a movie. Bad part of Stockton, California in the middle of summer. Needles everywhere around the property. And oh my god, the roaches. The fucking cockroaches these rooms had. I had to knock on every door with a code enforcement guy, wore a body cam, and a fire department guy. Everyone that answered the door to their rooms was clearly an addict and not all there. No judgment. I remember knocking on the door of a woman's room. She had 5 kids in there with her. Single mom and trash bags piled to the ceiling inside it. Cockroaches fucking crawling everywhere. It was a horrible sight. Every single occupant had 4 hours to get what they can carry and leave. Most of them tried to pack up their lives but they couldn't. A lot of stuff was left behind in those rooms. So many people asked me for help or what they need to do. I didn't have answers. I was just the guy needing everyone out. I couldn't believe the living conditions these people lived in to keep from being on the streets. It made me realize what I had. I burned my pants and boots when I got home. I washed my uniform shirt about 6 times. I threw my gloves away. I was so scared to bring cockroaches home to my own home. I still think about it to this day. Fucking millions of roaches infesting this place and they all slept in it. I got a second job as a night security for a local hospital my wife worked at. When I got home from the first night she jokingly asked how was my first night, Paul Blart. Well, I had to help with a woman coding out from a park bench outside from a heroin ad. Remove and catalog another woman's jewelry from her death on in the ER from a car crash. Then I had to break up a domestic dispute in the birthing unit. Check a few bodies out from the morgue to the coroner. She asked that I take a shower before I went to bed and never made fun of me again. I worked security at a hospital for 2 years. One afternoon we had a code gray to remove an unruly guest from the property. He was basically about to start punching doctors in the ER according to dispatch. But right when I got there 2 police were coming through the front door and the guy bolted. He practically threw an elderly nurse to the floor on his way down the hall, but I knew there was a T intersection he had to go through if he wanted to get to the fire exit door. I am 280 pounds semi-muscular 6 feet 1 inch and I tackled that guy into the wall so hard his head literally went through the drywall. It turned out he was a domestic abuse repeat offender, so it's too bad I couldn't help him find a wall stud. Anyway, I actually got a nice bonus and little award plaque that year, so good year. I was working on a railroad bridge in Fort Dodge. Yeah, when a guy jumped off the bridge 140 feet down into a shallow river to kill himself. He walked right past my co-workers who asked him what he was doing and he said calm as day, I'm jumping off this bridge. They aren't allowed to do anything but call the police in case the person tries grabbing you. He didn't waste any time. He was fully committed. My third shift as security, working at a motel around a big music event over a weekend. Guy that had been nice all weekend got super drunk last night. And when his family from out of town came to bring him home because he worked the next day, he went into a drunken rage and punched the window to his room. Sliced up his forearm pretty hard. Bleeding all over the place. Guy threatened to kick my ass for offering first aid. Group of early 20-somethings came out of their room and offered to kick his ass if I wanted them to. Guy ended up seeing the cops coming, running around to a friend's room. Cops followed the blood trail to the room and arrested the guy. He got first aid, and I think went to the hospital. Nice intro to security. That same weekend. What could have been fucked up? A couple Hells Angels were staying in one of the ground floor rooms, had their bikes parked right outside their door. Guy pulls me aside while I'm patrolling and tell me if I see anyone fucking with their bikes to alert them. Not the police, and they will handle it. Second night of the event, a drunk kid got lost and forgot where his room was. Knocked on their door at like 3:30 a.m. They were not happy, but luckily the house realized that it was just a dumb drunk kid, so just scared him off. And last, a serial shitter. Not just any shits. Massive crackhead shits. Like as big, around and long, as my forearm. He dropped them in stairwells all over a property I was watching. It was unbelievable to me how the guy didn't die dropping those deuces. Did eventually run into the guy. Crazy French dude. He was peeling the dead skin off his feet in the middle of the winter. I got within 20 feet of him and he started yelling at me to fuck off and saying he was going to kill me. Tried to spit on me and ran at me a couple times before running away across the street. An old man gets skinned by an escalator. Ouch. Any more info on what happened? To cut to the main point, he fell trying to help someone and the machine skinned him a good amount. Seriously, I got there when he was on the stretcher already, but there was legit blood on the escalator and his nose was barely hanging on. Worked a low-risk security job at a historical building on my university campus. The guy who had my position before me was fired because he was bringing his girlfriend and friends in after they hit the bars and let them walk around the building. Very beautiful and cool place, but also lots of priceless and important old books and records for the state among other things. He was disgruntled and my boss warned me that he had took his keys with when he left. If I see him, I'm supposed to call the cops. Everyone in the building knows about it and there's flyers with his photo at every desk. It's about 9 and the night shift guard comes in around 9 to relieve me. I'm walking down from the 4th floor to go meet them and hear a bunch of noise coming from the 2nd floor bathrooms. Walk in to find the guy drunk off his ass, just spraying bleach and other cleaning chemicals all over the women's bathroom and ceiling. I start to back up from the door to call police but tip over a wet floor sign. He saw me and screamed at me, then started chasing me. He's covered head to toe in these cleaning solutions and I'm booking it downstairs. These stairs are old and super worn down and marble and slippery as shit on their own. He's still chasing me and screaming and I hit those stairs in 4-wheel drive. He's right behind me and there's 2 sets locked doors on every exit. So I know I'm not going to be able to unlock them and get outside fast enough. I grab the fire extinguisher and hide around the corner of the stairs so I can whack him when he comes down them. Just as he's on the last flight, he slips on a step and eats shit on the ground, knocking himself out. I run to the exit and get outside and call the cops while the knock shift guard, this big huge dude we called Duke, comes running from across the street. Watching that deranged drunk dude covered in purple cleaning shit chase me through that building is burned in my memory. 4 very drunk teenagers somehow drove 3 miles down a walking trail behind our property and then overturned their car. This was at 2 in the morning. The dispatcher almost didn't believe me. Edit, I should probably add that they all survived, but it was still fucked up. Crazy Lamau.